I'd like to welcome everybody today. This is a new format for our Camps Innovation Forum. We're actually bringing our speaker who will be with us on March 1st here for an educational interview that you can preview prior to our discussion on March 1st. So first of all, I'm going to introduce just the fact that our Innovation Forum is really a place where we can introduce ideas and speakers and topics that will help all of us improve best practices, new things, new ideas. Norman Yu has been an exceptional leader of our Innovation Forum. He's at Kocer Engineering Consulting. Kocer can do anything and everything from an engineering standpoint and helps so many of our camps members and beyond with their manufacturing needs. So we highly recommend Kocer Consulting. And Norman has taken on this innovation forum. He has a background in industrial engineering, but he has his master's degree in learning and organizational change. He has a military background and experience at Amazon and other. He's paid the price, so to speak, to be in this position to lead, and especially to lead innovation. And we really appreciate you, Norman, and what you're doing here. So with that, I'll turn the time over to you to introduce our guest speaker.
Great. Thanks so much for that warm introduction, Kirk. So joining us for this interview, we're very excited to have Foram Sheth. Foram is a TEDx speaker and chief operating officer and co-founder of Ama La Vida, an innovative career, leadership, life, and health coaching company. Foram became a coach after her experience of burning out in her consulting career. This experience inspired her to help others create careers which are fulfilling, meaningful, and fit their personal needs and goals. She built Ama La Vida to help people in stopping to accept what others tell them is possible and to start living a life that they love by making coaching more affordable as well as results-oriented. Foram has served as adjunct faculty at Northwestern University and has a master's in learning and organizational change, along with her coaching certification in organizational and leadership coaching, also from Northwestern University, which is where Foram and I met several years ago. So Foram, it's a great pleasure to reconnect with you. I know I speak for camps. We're very excited to learn more about how you have leveraged your experiences and your skills to create the successful coaching company that really is truly transforming the industry. So welcome to the interview and welcome to the camps community.
Thank you, Norman, and thank you, Kirk, for kicking this off. This is going to be so fun to be reconnected again, Norman.
Absolutely. Great to see you. Now, I know we've talked quite a bit during our time at Northwestern around personal journeys and how that's shaped who we are, both as individuals, but also as professionals. I'm very curious if you could unpack a bit more about your own personal journey and personal story and how that led to the inspiration of creating Ama La Vida.
Yeah, thank you for asking. So let's go a little way back. So I was born in India and I came here when I was 9. And that's become such a big part of my story because as an immigrant coming to the States, I didn't know English and we really uprooted our whole life. So my dad was the only one who spoke English. He was very well educated, did his CPA equivalent. And when we moved here, we moved in with my aunt, uncle, and my cousins. They only spoke English. We only spoke Gujarati. So you can imagine in this household of 9 people where we don't know how to communicate. We don't understand the culture. And unfortunately, back then, this was back in the 80s, the translation to the work that my dad had done and his level of work didn't necessarily translate. And so my parents started life all over again. So my dad got a job at a Dunkin' Donuts. My mom, until my daughter was born, worked at Weber Grill in the factory, like building heavy machinery. So horrible working conditions. She would lift very, very heavy machine parts and worked about 12 to 14-hour shifts. She did the night shifts. But that was my upbringing for a very long time until, my dad, he did his CPA. When they started to get stable again, we moved around every year until 8th grade. So high school was the first time that I actually had a consistent time. And I share all of this with you because all I knew growing up is watching the sacrifice from my parents. I asked at a very early age to my parents, I'm like, why are you doing this to us? Like, it would just be so much easier if we can just go back home because we hate it here. And my dad looked at me, and it's me, my mom, my brother, and my dad. So my dad, he looked at me and he's like, look, we're doing this for you. The education and the opportunities that you will have here in the States, you will never have in India. And things have shifted so much in India, especially for females. It's still not the same. And so I realized very quickly the incredible sacrifice that they made. And also just the whole idea of like, this is all for my opportunities, which means I shouldn't be doing something just because other people are doing it. So fast forward, navigating college, ACTs, we didn't know any of that, but we navigated through it. I was, studying to be a doctor. So I was doing my MCAT, the whole thing. English being my second language, standards exams were always difficult for me. And so enter my dad again, who's served as my guide for the longest time. He's like, why are you doing this? Like, this isn't something that you're going to be excited about because you're going to have to keep doing these standards exams. So his only question to me was, why do you want to be a doctor? My answer to him was, because I want to help people. To which he then said, is this the only way to help people? Like, when you don't even know how to respond. And in anger, I was like, yes, this is the only way to help people. And you better believe I still took the MCAT and then realized Dad was right. Like, this is not the only way to help people, which is how I pivoted into healthcare consulting. So it was like an overnight decision. I needed to take the MCAT because I put way too much time into it and I needed to prove it to myself. Fast forward, started in healthcare consulting. And it was in consulting that I really loved the idea of being able to problem solve for others. And I love the rigor of consulting. You could go into anything. You didn't even have to be the expert, but you had these set of skills to understand, how do I understand what the client needs, what the creative solutions might be? And I loved all of that. And through that, Norman, I was then doing my master's in learning and organizational change because I realized change is at the root of any consulting that you do. And it was during MSLOC, our master's program, that I had my first ever exposure to coaching when we worked with a leadership coach. And it was in that first coaching session when my coach said to me, Foram, do you realize how much you're getting in your way? I was sharing with her about things that were happening at work. And I was like, what? You said what now? And in that moment, it's like, I don't think it was that aha moment that when my dad had asked me, is this the only way to help people? Another instance of, you realize you're getting in your own way. And it just took me back and I started to reflect on all the things that I was doing. Whereas ultimately what I was saying is, things are happening to me. My boss hates me. This isn't working for me. And she just helped me flip the whole script. I was like, wow, I have a lot more autonomy and also authority in the problems that I have and the solutions I have. And what I realized very quickly between consulting and coaching is, as a consultant, I was giving a fish because that was what I was paid to do, to solve someone's problems. When I got coached, I realized I was learning how to fish myself. And I love that. So I found out that they also had a coaching program, pursued it, and realized that I wanted to do coaching and consulting. What I couldn't give up through that whole process was the rigor of consulting. Just understanding the coaching industry is so archaic. And also, had I not been lucky enough to get into Northwestern, I would have never had exposure to coaching. Why is that, Norman? If you think about that, Kirk, people work their whole lives, and it's only when you've made it, you're in the C-suite, you're the 1%ers, could you afford coaching? And I call bullshit on that. I don't think that's okay. Coaching is required for everyone, and everyone can benefit from it. And that was part of the intention of why Ama La Vida was created.
That's a great vision. Wow.
That is great. I love how the analogies you use between coaching and consulting, right? And that's so relevant. And what I found, because I've also leveraged a lot of the learnings that I had from our graduate program, and the coaches that we've had, and kind of blended that together within my consulting approach. And something that we're very proud of at Kocer is where we not only come in and solve issues, but we partner with the client and almost serve as that coach, and we're solving it together, right? So the client is learning as we're working. And that's been a very, very valuable partnership. And in Forum, I know we had briefly spoken about camps as an organization, right? Center for Advanced Manufacturing Puget Sound, and how it's entirely comprised of, small and mid-sized manufacturers, distributors. So I'm sure they've heard the term coach, maybe from a sports perspective, but coaching professionally has been around for decades, but maybe not as familiar within the manufacturing space. But I do know you've worked with a couple of manufacturing clients in your past. Would you mind sharing a past example of how you were able to leverage a creative or innovative program to really help them connect with their employees, to help develop their talent, or even retain those top performers?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I would say, yes, you're absolutely right that coaching has been around, and there's probably two camps of people who think about coaching. There's the coaching is for those who need help because they're not doing good. So there's a very negative connotation.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a second camp of coaching is there because you've made it. You're the top of the top, and therefore you're going to get coaching. And we don't need to think in this or mindset. That really needs to meet people where they are. And when I think about coaching, I'm like, if you're going to spend that much money, I hope you're doing it for the people you want to keep in your organization, not for the people that you're trying to coach out. That ship has sailed of coaching people to coach them out. Now, thinking about coaching in the manufacturing space, I'll give you kind of two examples. One is a very, I would say, tangible one. We're working with an organization where they actually build those docks. So anywhere that you go, you see docks. They're huge. They're actually Seattle-based as well. So they build all the docks. And what they do is they have the foreman who, what they've done is they know how to physically build it together. As you get very good and you become an expert, you get promoted where you then manage your team. So you're no longer building anymore, but you're managing people who build. That's a very different skill set. So think about what made you successful was your ability to be there on time, your ability for your craftsmanship. Now what success looks like as a manager is no longer your craftsmanship, it's your ability to help support and elevate your crew. Very different thing. So you're looking at it from a coaching perspective. We're looking at it from two different angles. One, how do we help you redefine what success looks like as a manager now? Because you're still anchoring on what made you successful, not what new success is. Mm-hmm. So that's number one, is how do we help you understand yourself and redefine yourself? There's a lot of confidence components here too. Because mm-hmm. You're like, wait, what made me really good? I'm not good at it anymore. I used to be an all-star. Now I feel like I'm not there yet because there's a learning curve. And the second part of the coaching is, how do I now develop all these new sets of skill sets that I need to develop to help manage my team? What does it mean to delegate? What does it mean to empower? What does it mean to hold people accountable? What does it mean to inspire? These concepts of leadership, because leadership is so ambiguous, and I think people have a hard time wrapping their heads behind it because of the fact that it's so ambiguous. We have to make it tactical. And what does it mean for you? So when we're working with this organization, we took all of their people leaders and for one, just help provide a common language so that when we say feedback, here's what we're actually saying about feedback. Here's a framework that it is something that we need to talk about, not just when there's constructive things to say, but also positive. Then going into for each individual, how are you defining what your success is? How are you shifting your mindset to why you're here, what you're in this role? And what are the experiences that you're dealing with your group that we need to work through? So Norman, for you, maybe it's like you're so good at inspiring, but you're having a hard time with delegating. And for Kirk, maybe it's the exact opposite. It's not the same approach. I can't just give you both a template. I have to fully understand what's working for Kirk, what's getting in his way, what do we need to learn about? And that's where the individualized coaching plan happens.
But you mentioned that when you worked with a coach, there was a flipping of the script. And I was just curious, It seems like now you've had a chance to flip the script for many people, but it sounds very empowering. I was curious more on your thoughts about flipping that script.
Oh, great question. So let's take the example of this one comes up a lot about empowering, or excuse me, delegation. Generally, it's if I give someone, my team members, they're already overwhelmed, I don't want to add more to their plate. So therefore, I'm going to do it. So that's an assumption that a leader may have. And you're doing it, and the way you're justifying it in your head is because I don't want to overwhelm them already. To my response to that is, well, what opportunities, learning opportunities, did you just take away from them? How do they want to develop their career, and how are you giving them opportunities to learn that? And then they go, oh, I thought I was helping them. I'm like, right, you made that decision, an assumption that you were helping them, rather than having the conversation with your team member. If you just put yourself in their shoes and you were in their shoes and you saw a manager that you worked with who really took all the work, how do you feel? And usually the moment we have this, I help them recognize, where are you today? Like, how are you currently thinking about it? If I just help you think about it from a different lens and ask you a different question, you're going to go, oh. And that's the whole thing about coaching, is understanding, how are you thinking? If you think 1 + 1 = 2, I also need to teach you that 2 + 0 also equals 2. That there is a different way to get there.
One thing, and you talk about mindset and different ways of getting to the solution. I know a personal struggle of mine early on in my career. I studied engineering in undergrad, and in engineering, it's so much about, convergent thinking, converging on one single answer, solve for X. And that's just how my mind was wired. But then I quickly realized that the most challenging issues that we're facing at work, or even in our personal lives, it's not really black or white. There's so many shades of gray around it. And it's more or less, always bringing back to change and people and how we process and navigate through ambiguity. So I quickly learned that it's not just converging on one single answer, it's diverging, right? And going out and looking at exploring all possible answers and the best answers available. And it might be different for different people. And when you talk about empowerment, leadership, even delegation, it's oftentimes very difficult to quantify, those aspects. And when we deal with businesses, especially small businesses with limited resources, being able to quantify or put a number and associate that with a tangible result is very, very powerful. Are there any strategies that you can share for how businesses can quantify these ambiguous aspects that they're trying to get to?
That's a really great question. As a small business owner myself, yeah, that's real. I want to know, because I'm invested in every single penny that is being spent, and I want to know that it's going somewhere. There's a few ways whenever someone is thinking about, I know we're talking about coaching, but this goes broadly beyond just coaching. This is about anything you're doing with your people, whether that be, we're going to put in a new LMS system, we're going to do a whole new performance review process. Think about why you're ultimately doing it. Like, what does success look like for you all? So if we just keep going with this lens of coaching and you're investing in, let's say, your directors, what does success look like? Is it that you want to engage? Is it that you want to retain? Is it that you want to help set them learn a new set of skills? So is it that you need an attitude shift? What does success look like for your organization when you do this? And I would say to all the maximizers who are listening, the answer cannot be all of the above. Pick one thing. Specifically, what is it that you are looking to achieve if you had one thing? Now work backwards. If you're saying, we're doing this because we don't have a succession pipeline. Like, we are needing to build the next leaders. So for you, if it's about succession pipeline, then think about, how will you measure your succession pipeline? Is it about how many of them get promoted? Also, how about their team members? How many of their team members are getting promoted? Because it's not just about their succession, it's about the next and the next and the next. So once you define that, then it's, how do I create a program that helps me measure and also knows we're getting on this path of succession planning. So this would be another case study where we're working with another organization. For them, their directors, high-level directors, they were seeing a drop-off in terms of retention. In addition to that, they felt like they didn't have, and part of the reason why they saw a drop-off, so the symptom was, we see all these people leaving. When they really dug into it, they found what's actually happening is they feel like they don't have a succession plan, like they don't have a career progression here. So how do we help them get to that next level as an organization and as individuals? So what we did is we put together this program for actually even defining, what does a high potential director look like within your organization? Also within that, what does it look like to get promoted to VP? What are the skill sets that they need that they currently don't have or exposure to? And regarding those skill sets, what is it that they need to learn still? So we put together this program where they did workshops. So just so that they can have that common language where we can walk through, okay, you have to inspire. You need to think about strategy. You're so used to thinking about one vertical, you have to think laterally for the whole organization. So they had these competencies where we helped them define, here's what these competencies mean in your role and how you can demonstrate that even in your role. And then all of them were paired with their one-on-one coaching, right? So what about Kirk in particular? What can he continue to keep working on? And then what does he need to develop more of? And what we found is, because we were looking at promotions and their next level of leaders, what we found is, well, one, what came out of it is, because they went through this program together, it was cohort based. So there was a group that went through this program for 6 months, 100% retention after 6 months, 30% of them got promoted while they were going through this program. And part of it was just having that confidence and know-how. They built this connection with this peer group. And that's what we were looking to achieve. So I would say get very, very particular about what does it look like. And it can't be broad and it can't be all of the above. Pick one thing, because that's how you can then design a really good program and make sure you know exactly how you're measuring.
Just as we're talking about coaching and really partnering, and getting down to that one specific area that we want to focus on, I believe, to maximize the efficacy of coaching, you really have to have some trust built with the individual. And then broadly speaking, if we're looking at the organization, there should be a culture of trust as well for it to really to maximize the effectiveness of coaching. Are there any tips or advice you can give to manufacturers to really, to establish that culture of trust, not just with their direct reports or C-suite or even office employees, but all the way down to the shop floor level with the hourly workers?
It all starts with the top. And here's what I mean. So often a common mistake is, as the leadership team, we're good. We just want to help everybody else. And it's like, no, but you're the role model. You actually help lead the way, and you can't just talk the talk, you need to walk the walk. So first things first is, it needs to be just, especially when we're thinking about a culture of psychological safety, it needs to start with the leadership team, because they're really helping to say, this is what we value and this is what we expect. So when a leader comes up and says, I made a mistake, like this is something I'm still working on, that just gives everybody else the permission to say, okay, first of all, this person is human, and I appreciate that it feels safe to be vulnerable, or to say, here are the things I'm working on, or where I still need help. So it definitely has to start from the top. And if we think about the components of psychological safety, what does that actually mean? It means the ability to feel safe, to be our true, authentic self. So if there's a culture where we have automatically shut people down for acting a certain way because they don't feel a prototype that we have built, well, already you need to think about systematically, what is your organizational, how is that set up for the type of psychological safety that you want to build? What it also means is sometimes it could be process related, where it just becomes routine and habit, where you might end a team meeting with saying, what is one thing that you learned where you failed really quickly and that you learned? And that becomes part of the workings of an organization. There's a lot to dig into when it comes to psychological safety, but I would say the common mistake is, it's almost like, of course this is a safe space, you should speak freely. But you actually realize that the moment someone speaks freely, they might be retaliated against. There's consequences because of the way that somebody who's in a higher role, the way that they react. So they're the ones that really need to help lead the way for what it looks like to exhibit psychological safety.
Companies are creating high performance teams through psychological safety. So I think your conversation about this is something all leaders should really think about. But if they don't know how to create an environment that doesn't retaliate or punish people, I mean, sometimes you're not even aware of how you're doing it. So again, this is where coaching can become very valuable. But I think it's something, psychological safety is something that would benefit any organization, and they will see increases in productivity when that happens.
So I appreciate you sharing that, Kirk. Coming from a healthcare background, hospital organizations, psychological safety is huge, especially when you make a critical error with a patient. So a doctor may find it a lot easier to own up as opposed to maybe a nurse or a technician. And so at this one hospital organization, one thing that they were very intentional about, this goes back to the intention, is creating an organization, a culture of high psychological safety. So what they did was, anytime there was a case that did not go perfectly the way that they had anticipated, they would do what they call protocol psychological safety debriefs. And there were a set of questions that everyone had to go through, and they did the group got together, talked about what went well, what could have been better, what was everyone's role in it. And what they found, that the more they kept doing this, the technicians were able to freely share, like, this just isn't working. Like, the way that you've set up this workflow just doesn't work for us, but we do it because that's what the doctor needs, or that's what this person needs. And they were able to share, there's actually better ways to do this. So what they found is their error rates decreased because of the fact that they put in some infrastructure to say, we actually need to hear from you. Tell us what's not working. Can you imagine on the manufacturer floor, the people who are actually there working day in and day out, they probably have so many great insights about what's working, what's not working. But if they fear that they're going to be retaliated against to share, people are not going to take that chance.
I think we all know that from sitting in a classroom where we're afraid to raise our hands, to answer a question. But also I could see how this, just this concept of psychological safety would really create an environment of innovation if we were free to talk about problems and feel like we were heard, feel like the things we talked about were actually acted upon. So, I mean, it's not a very easy issue. I mean, psychological safety includes a lot of different elements.
Just as you guys were talking about psychological safety and then tying it back to the manufacturing floor, my mind kind of went to lean manufacturing and Kaizens and Gembas. And it's really all around getting out to the source of the problem and engaging and connecting with those that are dealing with those issues. Because to your point, Foram, a lot of insights can come from the ones actually doing the work versus a bunch of VPs sitting in a boardroom trying to come up with solutions for them. So really partnering with those that are feeling the pain points, experiencing that day in and day out, and then hearing them, what ideas do they have, I think is a great takeaway for those that are listening to this call.
If I could get your opinion on this idea of autopsy without blame as part of psychological safety. It's if somebody feels blame, but in the end, I may have made a mistake on the team. I need to own up to that. But yet, if I feel blamed, I may be slow to raise my hand. Or if I feel troubled about that, I might blame somebody else versus owning it. So do you have anything to say about autopsy without blame, or how you coach clients towards that?
I love that framing, Kirk. So thank you. I may need to borrow that. I think this goes back to, this actually is about the type of culture, the learning culture, or in fact, if we use Carol Dweck's work, she talks about fixed mindset and growth mindset. They're individually, how do we get people to, one, not feel paralyzed by a mistake? And then also, how do we just make it part of a routine? So for example, knowing that if someone does share something, there is a company protocol, then we cannot retaliate. And so therefore it just makes people feel safe, where because there's a process there, they feel open to it. Or if it's an anonymous box, so to speak. Another one getting into it is making it part of your day-to-day interactions. So in my one-on-ones, or even with my 4-year-old daughter, I say, what is one thing you did today that you learned? right? Instead of how was your day? What did you learn today? How did you learn it? Or I love the Sphinx founder, where she always asked her kids around the dinner table, which is, how did you feel today? And if we can just help reframe, this goes back to the mindset again. If we can just help people reframe and say failure is actually not a bad thing, if we can name it, own it, and then actually do something about it, that can go a long way. And I also feel like what you're talking about, Kirk, is another component of having a culture of accountability and ownership. So at Ama La Vida, we have a culture commandment called break it, own it, fix it. Break it. We want you to break things because that means that it could happen with a client. Own it. Tell us you broke it. And then let's figure out how we're going to fix it because we're in it together. I think the other part of it is if I raise my hand and say, this is broken, am I going to have to do all of the work? I don't want to do all of the work. And the intention is, no, you don't always have to be the one who has to fix it, but it would be helpful if you say, there's a thing here. I may not know the answers, but I can help you identify the right problem, which goes back to what Einstein talks about is give me 60 minutes and I'll spend 55 minutes thinking about what is the actual problem. 5 minutes on the solution, because the solution is easy. What people actually spend most of their time on is fixing the wrong things because they don't know what the true problem is.
Yeah, this whole group you're talking to, they live that, eat that, and breathe that, but I think we could all be better at it.
How much have we heard about root cause analysis, right, Kirk, and the 5 whys to get down to the root cause? So fantastic reminder for them. Thank you. If you could just synthesize just all this down to one piece of advice that you could give to a small business for how they can better engage and retain their talent, what would that be for them?
If you don't know where to start with your mid-level managers. So they're probably your second or third in command from your C-suite. They are your most expensive to replace when you lose them. And they will actually give you the most benefit from a succession planning, from an engagement, from a results perspective, because they influence below, they lead teams of teams, and they influence above. They're just enough in the weeds to know what's going on, and they're just enough to understand the strategy of the organization. So if you don't know where to start, that's the group that you want to start with. You can't afford to lose them.
You offer a coaching service. And so could you tell us more about your coaching service?
Absolutely. So for us, the big thing here is first things first, we don't ever coach people out. We think about coaching for your high potentials, the people who are really going to take your organization to the next level. The second piece is understanding from a cohort perspective. What we like to do is coach based in cohorts, because what we find is when a group experiences something together, they have greater loyalty to each other and to the organization. So people leave jobs not because of their work, but people leave jobs because they had a crappy manager, because they didn't connect with their peers. So just in the way that we do our work, it's to help with that process itself. When we're doing one-on-one coaching, it's really trying to understand and being very intentional about what exactly is the problem that we're trying to solve and how do we measure that. And that's really making sure that we're helping at ensuring that there's a common language being shared. People need to speak from the same rule book. And then that one-on-one, because you cannot have change without that individualized, personalized approach. And you're going to see that that's a thread to all of the work that we do. Because one thing that I have learned again and again is if you think one workshop is going to solve everything, it's just a waste of money. So if you have a few grand, don't waste it on a workshop. People are going to be excited for 1 hour and then they will forget all of that information. It's like going to school where you're like, this is great in theory, but how do I apply this to me? So that's where I would highly recommend one-on-one coaching.
I do look forward to our upcoming innovation meeting. First Wednesday of the month. So for March, it'll be March 1st from 10 to 11 Pacific time. And I'm really excited to take a deeper dive into the application portion, right? You know, we've kind of talked about all this theory and really kind of honing in on how that can be applied and making it real for our camps members. But it's also open to non-camps members as well. It's really intended to be an interactive forum for like-minded individuals with a passion for innovation. So we definitely look forward to having a great meeting. The link to register is going to be attached to the YouTube video, so we'll attach it there, as well as with the camp's website and the Ama La Vida website as well. But Forum, again, truly has been a delight for our paths to cross one more time. Look forward to continue to working with you and partnering with you. And again, welcome to the camps community. Very happy to have you.
What a pleasure. Thank you so much, Norman. And I'm excited to talk about, we focus so much on coaching. There's so many things that people can do tomorrow that don't cost you any money to think about retaining and engaging your talent. I mean, it's basic human principles. And so I really want to talk about things that don't cost you anything. Just make sure it's part of your culture, to what does it look like to really make an investment. So I'm excited for what's to come on March 1st. So thank you, Kirk. Thank you, Norman, for having me. It's been so fun.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.